Hello, YouTube. I want to tell you a little bit more about my time at UPS as a package handler. When I used to come in and out of the guard shack, it was routine for them to make people take their hair down. They would wand women's breasts before even going through the metal detector. They would rip apart people's coolers and take the shells out of them, make you take your shoes or your boots off. Hell, sometimes they even make you take your socks off. They treated their employees coming in and out of the guard shack like thieves and felons. And sometimes the guards were just absolutely intolerable. Working there was like going in and out of a jailhouse. They would allow people who were actual criminals to work there. And some of the men and women that worked there were completely unprofessional. They were, sometimes they would take equipment like a piece of metal that they found and they would beat on the slides because they were angry about how hard the volume was being pushed. You'd hear bam, 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 bam. Package would get crushed, thrown, smashed, ripped apart. So many different crazy things happening there, but management really didn't give a damn about the employees at all. They went further than most companies go. They'd cuss at you. They'd throw stuff in your work area. They'd tell you to get the fuck out of the way. And they would physically get in there when they were really angry sometimes and do workers' jobs and just absolutely insult them. On the bad days, they would have to call for help from other areas of the buildings because it was so bad in some of these work areas. I was constantly being sent from one area to another. Basically, and this is not even a metaphor, they were literally calling me like a firefighter to go in there and rescue these distressed work areas where people were not pulling their weight because they were overwhelmed or because they were lazy. We would have workers come in there that were high off their asses on drugs. And they would be completely just, like you could tell there was something wrong with them. And then shortly thereafter, within a few days or a few weeks, you would hear that that person had been fired because they'd been caught stealing. It wasn't uncommon at all to find boxes that carried cell phones ripped open and missing their contents. I had people that I worked with in my work area that got fired or arrested for doing that. And I was like, it's not happening in my load. My trucks, I was not going to be blamed for that. At one point, they had a high value package that had bars of gold get ripped open by somebody at another hub later on after they were loaded into one of my trucks. And I had no idea what the hell was in any of those packages. But I was always very careful if anything got tore open to take it over to asset protection because I knew I could get blamed. But it was just ridiculous. The whole workplace, the way that they operated there, they would shove the volume down through the system so hard that we'd have stuff getting destroyed almost every day without fail. Sometimes it'd be a massive amount of packages that would be just crushed or ripped apart, dropped from high elevation, 3 or 4 stories up. It would drop because the system was overwhelmed. They would push the volume as hard and as fast as they could because they wanted to keep the hours that people worked to get the trucks loaded down. And they cared more about that than they did about having to pay insurance claims on people's destroyed stuff. Some of the stuff that was destroyed was personal goods that people had. They shipped family photos and things like that. Don't ship anything that you care about through UPS, because I guarantee you that if you ship enough volume, you're going to find that some things disappear. It'll get ripped apart. Sometimes packages will get torn open by people. They hire people off the street who are homeless. And I understand, those people need jobs, but some of the people that are homeless are homeless for a reason. You know, they don't drug test their workers there. I was working with people who were thugs, and that's not even an exaggeration. I'm completely serious when I say that. When I applied there, I applied because I was desperate for a job. I already had a job, and I needed a second one. And it ended up being a disaster. I stayed until after my spouse died, and then they fired me when I got sick. That's my experience with UPS. It was constant harassment. I'd get rotated through different work areas. They were mostly staffed by African Americans or Latinos, and I've got nothing against either of those groups of people. I'm actually very progressive, but the people that were there did not want to treat me with respect. I'll just put it that way. They were used to people having advantage over them that were white, and many of them were eager to throw attitude my way or try to mistreat me and disrespect me. I was constantly having to file grievances because people wanted to test the limits of what they could get away with as far as I was concerned. And I hated it. I hated the fact that I couldn't simply be allowed to come to a job that was paying me poorly and work in peace for insurance for my family, because I wasn't taking home enough to support my family. I just wanted to make sure that my family could go to the doctor and get access to medicine. My wife was sick all the time. It was great as far as a workout, but they were ridiculous. They would steal time off our checks. Our supervisors wouldn't even add our time up right. And sometimes they would take time off of there on purpose. They would get bonuses for meeting certain personnel production standards. So, I mean, you wouldn't even get paid for the time that you worked. If they thought they could get away with it, they would outright take your hours off your check. The bathrooms were filthy on the ground floor, especially on the outbound side of the operation, where the feeder trailers were at the wall. The outside wall of the buildings where the trailers would line up. And trash would get dropped on the floor all the time. The drain grates would be clogged up with dirt, cardboard, and mud. And the floor in the bathroom would be covered in piss. The guys would piss all over the floor inside the building in the bathroom. And you'd be tracking in and out of the bathroom through a floor that was soaked in urine. And the walls would be filthy in there. There'd be graffiti in the stalls with Sharpie painted on there, different names, numbers, pictures. People would get the crayons and draw explicit pictures on the walls of the outbound trailers that we worked in. There was a picture that somebody put on one of the trailers of a she-male. I am not even kidding. I'm completely serious. It said next to the picture, "Watch out." And it was a woman in a dress. Well, with a giant, you know what I'm going to say. And I was like, wow, I can't believe somebody actually had the time to do that. Like, how long did it take them to draw that picture? It was almost life-size. That's how big this picture was. They drew it in black crayon that we used to write on the packages. And it was just crazy. The whole way they ran the operation was ramshackle. If people only knew how the company actually operated. They used to call the hub that I worked at the ghetto hub. That's how UPS actually is inside the warehouses. It's almost comical. It's a miracle people get their packages at all. Thanks for listening.